Hi everyone, this is a short video on the writing process, and the motivation for this video is that many of us believe that writing is a gift and only some of us can write well. Well, truth be told, there's a misconception that arises because we tend to judge an author through their piece of writing, that is the product, whereas the process that went into producing that piece of writing is mostly hidden to us. In fact, until the mid-1970s, most of the discussion on writing centered around the product. But as soon as people started to look into the process, they realized that the product tells us very little or nothing about how to write effectively. And on the contrary, all good authors have a lot of similarities in their writing processes. And the most important thing for us to learn is that good writers write in stages. And essentially, they found that there are 4 distinct stages in which good writers produce their pieces of text. So it's very important for us to write well that we learn about these different stages involved in writing. The first stage, which they termed as pre-drafting, involves everything that goes on before this act of putting your thoughts on a piece of paper or a computer screen in front of you. So you can think of this as looking for sources, reading literature about what you're writing, coming up with an outline or a structure of your text, and so on and so forth. So everything that prepares you to draft or to have this physical act of writing. So everything that goes before that is termed as pre-drafting. Now, the next stage, of course, is drafting, where you put your thoughts on a piece of paper or a computer screen in front of you. And essentially, you can think of drafting as also a stage which we call as writing to understand. And oftentimes we as scientists are guilty of the fact that, we love or we enjoy doing science and we forget about writing because we sometimes hate that we need to have writing as part of our, of our, work as a scientist. And therefore we enjoy our time doing science and we just leave writing to be something that we do at the end. If you can involve writing as part of your science, you could have better understanding of your research as it is developing, right? And this is through the act of writing. Many scientists I've met who use writing as a way to gain better understanding. And even, if you have this habit of writing at the end, you will also gain newer insights into your work or into your research through this act of writing. So of course, it's much better that as you are doing experiments, you are analyzing your results, you continue to write about them. Of course, that's very important because it helps you gain better understanding and insights into your work. And the stage that comes after this is what we call as the revising stage. Now, while writing was for the writer, or sorry, drafting was for the writer, revising is for the reader, right? So this is the stage which we also call as writing to be understood. And many times young writers really struggle with this stage because as soon as they're finished drafting, they think, I'm done and let me just submit this paper. It's a personal story as well that when I finished my first paper, I thought this is a beautiful piece of writing and how could anybody find fault in this paper? So, but once I sent it out to my advisor and then to reviewers, I realized, I really knew very little about writing at that point, right? Essentially, what goes into the revising stage is your understanding of your readers, right? So your readers have certain expectations from your text, and you should ensure that you satisfy those expectations, especially for most of the readers, right? And that they're able to follow your science. And no matter how good your science is, if your readers are not able to follow your work and understand it and later use it, it's no use, right? It's an important part of doing science to be able to explain it to your peers. And finally, we have the stage, what we call the editing stage. So oftentimes, I've seen some of the non-native speakers of English, when they are writing, or where they are in this drafting stage, they tend to produce perfect sentences and they worry too much about grammar. And what happens is during the revision stage or when it goes to their advisor, many times a lot of your paragraphs or sentences are taken away because they don't fit in the story, right? So what is the point of spending so much time producing perfect sentences and paragraphs when they might be taken away? And therefore, we leave editing to the last stage where you would correct for grammar and spelling and so on and so forth. So these are essentially the 4 different stages that form the writing process. And here is here is an excerpt from an article written by Greg Mankiw, who's a macroeconomist from Harvard. The article is called "My Rules of Thumb," in which he talks about how one could become a good scientist, but he also talks about writing in that. He's a prolific writer, has written, I guess, about a dozen books and a number of research articles. Let's see what he has to say about writing. And he starts his paragraph on writing by saying that writing well is hard work. Well, surprise, surprise. We all have gone through the process of writing and we know that it's not easy, right? But let's see what he has to say. He says that it requires that you revise, and revise. Okay, so he's putting a lot of emphasis on the revision stage. Let's go on. Then when you think you're done, you should revise again. So again, a lot of emphasis on revision, right? Good writing is fun to read, but it's often not fun to do. So if you have read papers that read really well and you felt that, you know, this guy is an awesome writer, well, chances are that that person has to go through a lot of revision to make sure most of their readers are able to understand what they want to convey in an easy manner, right? And then Greg Mankiw says, I once asked John Kenneth Galbraith the secret to success as a popular writer. So he quotes somebody who also worked at Harvard as an economist. And let's see what John Galbraith has to say about writing. He said that he revises everything many times. Around the 5th draft, he manages to work in the touch of spontaneity that everyone likes. So an accomplished writer like John Galbraith takes about 5 stages of revision, right? So you can imagine how important revision is to the entire writing process. And I've talked to many young writers, and when I was, you know, doing my PhD or postdoc, I understood that, you know, as young writers, it's very difficult to know what goes into the revision stage, right? You may come to appreciate the importance of revision stage, but as a young writer, you still feel like I kind of don't know what should I do and what are these expectations of readers. And therefore, it's very important for you to be aware of the reader-centered approach to writing, or the reader expectation approach. That is, what are the readers looking for when they are reading your text? Because we have a different body of readers. Some readers start reading with the figures, some start by reading the results, some start by reading conclusion. And I've talked to many people, and people have different styles. So how could you make sure that you're able to satisfy the needs of your readers? And therefore, you need to learn about the reader-centered approach to writing. And here are a few resources that you could look into. This article, The Science of Scientific Writing, is a wonderful article that you could look at. If you want to go deeper, you could look at this book by George Gopen, The Sense of Structure. And here's a short article that I really like to read before I start writing a paper, because it explicitly tells you, you know, what part goes into which section. Oftentimes, as science documents that we are producing, we are confused about, you know, whether I should put it in the discussion or in the results or in the methodology. So take a look at this article as well. It's a short article which talks about what goes into which part. So this was all about the writing process. Make sure you spend enough time on the revision stage. And I've talked to many people, and actually good writers spend as much time as on the revision stage as it takes them in the drafting stage. So you can imagine the amount of effort that it needs in terms of revising your text. And if you're not putting in that effort, maybe you need to revisit that. And perhaps that is the thing that is missing from you being able to produce good pieces of writing. And that brings me to the end of this video. I'd like to do so by thanking my mentors at the Princeton Writing Program, Judy Swan and Amanda Wilkins, and my colleague there, Francois Laforge, from whom I've learned a great deal about scientific writing and teaching scientific writing. And thank you all for your attention.